Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Premsako Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Arigaur Bhaktavinda ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinatha Shai Mukunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan ki jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Mayapur Dham ki jai. Jagannath Puri ki jai. Tulsi Maharani ki jai. Bhakti Devi ki jai. Samaveda Bhaktavinda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Prabhuji, pani hai? So last week we covered the foreword by Dr. Thomas J. Hopkins. Then we read the preface. Today we'll begin the introduction of Volume 2 entitled Planting the Seed. Now it turns out that Satsvarup Das Goswami, because he was physically present from 1966 onwards, up until present day. He saw the very beginning of when Prabhupada planted the seed of Krishna consciousness in America. He decided to print this volume 2 before volume 1, because in order to gain all of the research and the interviews required for properly So therefore, Planting the Seed was actually printed and distributed before Volume 1. And this is the original cover. All of the covers had this beautiful cloth-type binding with one particular picture that would portray what was going to be described within the volume. So Satsvarup Maharaj, normally, in a book, there are acknowledgments. And I want to read these acknowledgments before we start reading today, because we were just hearing in the Hindi class that when Srila Prabhupada printed his books, he was a one-man show. He translated the books, he brought the books to the printer, he oversaw the printing, then he distributed the books. He had to collect all the money for the books. But because in 1978, after Prabhupada disappeared, the GBC commissioned or assigned Satsvarup Das Goswami to write this biography, an authorized biography of Prabhupada, and everyone was just waiting to receive this book. He needed a lot of help. He couldn't do it himself, because interviews had to be taken from all over the world. So he gives his acknowledgments. Many of these devotees are still active in Krishna consciousness. Some have gone back to Godhead already to join Prabhupada. And some of them, we hope to find out where they are and bring them back to their services. While our well-wishers have been many, it has been a small staff of workers that has actually produced the finished product. Foremost among my assistants have been Mandaleshwar Das and Shesha Das. Mandaleshwar edited the manuscript with total dedication and good literary intelligence. Shesha absorbed himself in supervising the research and solving the sometimes difficult mysteries of chronology and missing facts. Radha Ballabha Das, Bhaktivedanta Book Trust production manager, enthusiastically encouraged me through the progressive stages of the volume, from its beginning to its completion. He also conducted many interviews and was ready to travel at a moment's notice to trace down a witness. Working at the Gita Nagari farm community in Pennsylvania, our research staff Kundali Das, Baladev Vidyabhusan Das, and Krishna Sneha Das, kept our files in order and made the constant influx of data available to me in a usable form. Jayadvaita Swami, Srila Prabhupada's own editor, gave a final polishing to the manuscript. Our faithful typists, Acharya Devi Dasi, Dasyaras Devi Dasi, and Bhakti Marg Devi Dasi, never balked at typing up another draft or another version throughout the progressive stages of the manuscript. The typists in the BBT office, Mamata Devi Dasi, Arundhati Devi Dasi, Dukahantri Devi Dasi, and Purnachandra Devi Dasi, have been working steadily at the huge task of typing up all of Srila Prabhupada's taped lectures and conversations, which we are consulting and incorporating into the text. The BBT Press production staff of Sureshwar Das, Gopi Puranadana Das, Simeshwar Das, Brihad Mridanga Das, Balai Devi Dasi, Kshama Devi Dasi, and others have done the designing, composing, proofreading, and layout, preparing the volume for press. Vidyananda Das, Ekanath Das, and Paramrupa Das, who are compiling an archive collection of Srila Prabhupada's tapes and photos, readily supplied materials needed for this volume. The devotees whose memoirs have contributed most significantly to this volume are Brahmananda Swami and Hayagriva Das. As this volume has been appearing serially in Back to Godhead magazine, BTG readers have given me much advice, which I have considered and tried to incorporate. Some of the names of people appearing in this book have been changed. So this is the behind the scenes. And these devotees, whose names have been mentioned here by Satsrup Maharaj, you have to understand that the ISKCON Press, which was started in Boston and then transferred to New York, to Brooklyn, then from Brooklyn in 1975, everything was transferred to Los Angeles. And from 1975 to 1977, they were in constant marathon. Prabhupada wanted his books all printed. We've all heard about the Chaitanya Charitamrita marathon and Prabhupada's Srimad Bhagavatams, up to the last breath that Srila Prabhupada took when Prabhupada was translating 10th Canto, Chapter 13. All of these books had to be printed. So it was these exact same devotees, many of them, who were there working tirelessly to print Prabhupada's books at the BBT in Los Angeles. And then Srila Prabhupada, he entered Samadhi. Who was going to write any more books? The entire BBT was there for publishing Prabhupada's books. Where were the books going to come from? So the first thing the GBC did was assign that these books be printed. So the same staff, the same devotees who were printing Prabhupada's books were now being engaged to print Prabhupada's Lilamrita. And they carried on, just like Arundhati. She would travel with Prabhupada and her husband, Pradumna. Balai, the wife of Advaita, who was the printer. From the very beginning, they were all there printing Prabhupada's books in America. So these devotees were so dedicated to the press work of the BBT. And now they were having the opportunity for a great adventure. Mysterious, because Prabhupada, he did not put emphasis on his own life. He was interested in giving everyone Krishna consciousness and talking about Krishna. Now we have an entirely different focus, and that is trying to pick up from the few places where Prabhupada would intimately discuss with his disciples what happened in his life. Sometimes, like the examples given, they took Prabhupada to New York, 1976, for the biggest Rath Yatra in the world, down Fifth Avenue. You were there. Nice. Yes. Now you go to Mayapur, 10,000 devotees. But that was big. There's 700 devotees. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj took Prabhupada to where he used to live, 72nd Street in Amsterdam. And Prabhupada showed the devotees the building that he wanted to purchase to make the first temple, what his plans were. So they had never seen that before. Prabhupada just revealed a little bit about these early days that we're going to read about. And now we'll have this opportunity. We'll go back to the introduction where Satsvarup Maharaj begins this story. As the present volume begins, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, age 69, is traveling aboard a steamship from Calcutta. Let's see, okay. He carries with him the Indian equivalent of $8. So in those days, we all heard that Prabhupada was only allowed to take 40 rupees with him. That means the exchange rate in 1965 was 5 rupees to $1. Now it's 85 rupees to $1. So the rupee was very strong then, but nobody wanted rupees. So Prabhupada came back with the same rupees that he went with, because he couldn't even exchange them. He had no institutional backing, and no support awaits him. He is coming on the order of his spiritual master to teach Krishna consciousness to the English-speaking world. Planting the Seed is the story of Srila Prabhupada's first year in America. It is the story of how an individual will, patiently persisting, overcame great obstacles. And it is the story of a time, the 1960s, when American youth underwent a revolution in consciousness. All right, so this is the next pictures. Because most of Prabhupada's disciples grew up in this period of the counterculture that was a phenomenon in America, Canada, and Western Europe. It was grounded on dissatisfaction with the norms of the present mainstream society in those parts of the world, because the morals and the ethics of their generation, their parents, was not the way that the youth wanted to live. So they rejected that lifestyle. And in great numbers, mostly middle class, white, well-educated young men and women gave up the principles that were imbibed by them from their parents and threw it away. And the sayings in those days were, make love, not war, tune in, turn on, and drop out. So you'll see here, these are people, they might have come for a demonstration against war, a demonstration for liberal rights, because at that time still there was complete segregation of the blacks and the whites. They might have been coming for women's rights, but in great numbers, specifically, the youth were coming for music, because music is the way, an expression of one's heart. So the youth, through their music, their rock and roll, their folk music, they would come to these huge open concerts where they would hear the music of their times, and along with them, the devotees would also be there. They would be passing out incense and books and peacock feathers. So this is how Krishna consciousness, we'll read later, of course it'll all be incorporated in this one volume, spread amongst the youth of the Western countries.
That's Woodstock, 500,000 people.
Yes, I was at Woodstock.
So, as a
hmm?
devotee, but aspiring devotee here.
Myself?
Yeah.
Of course. There are many devotees there.
But not yet in touch with Krishna consciousness. Huh?
No, not yet.
Yeah, that's amazing.
The story of the 69 years of Srila Prabhupada's life before he boarded the steamship for America is presented in the first volume of this series, A Lifetime in Preparation. The present volume, however, is complete in itself, and the reader meets His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada exactly as did the first persons he confronted in America, where suddenly he appeared as an elderly, golden-skinned Bengali sadhu, very grave and philosophically inward, yet humorous and talkative, a stranger wearing saffron robes and white pointy shoes and carrying an umbrella. Now, where Prabhupada landed, Boston, in September, then he went to Pennsylvania, then he came to New York. It becomes very cold in New York, way, way below freezing. And the whole first winter, Srila Prabhupada wore his plastic white shoes that you would use in the bathroom here. Prabhupada didn't have any boots, he didn't have warm clothes, and he had to bear the cold, the snow, the loneliness, and the lack of facilities that whole first winter alone.
It was especially cold.
Especially cold, yes. He was known simply as the Swami, and he lived a spiritually dedicated life previously unheard of in the West, translating the Vedic scriptures in his room, chanting Krishna's name, teaching the Bhagavad-Gita. Now, when the devotees took Prabhupada in 1976 to where he was staying at this time, they asked Prabhupada, "What was in your room?" He said, "It wasn't a room, it was an office. There was nothing there. There was just an attached bathroom." "Were you able to cook in the room?" "No, I couldn't cook in the room. There was no facility." "Did you have a bed?" "No, there was no bed. I just slept on the floor." He said there was a platform. So this is how Prabhupada lived, how he was able to tolerate these austerities the first year. When he walked in Manhattan, people would sometimes come up to him on the street and ask who he was and what he was doing. And he would tell them from the Vedic scriptures about Krishna consciousness. So there's a city in Canada, Vancouver. It's on the west coast. And the devotee who designed our entire temple and built our temple, Surabi Swami, he was visiting Vancouver, and he met a very old man. And the man was telling Surabi Swami that I met your Swami in New York City in 1965. I used to go to the park every day in New York and sit on a particular bench. And one day, I saw someone sitting there dressed in robes. I had never seen anyone like him before in my life. And he was sitting right at the bench where I was sitting. So I sat down and I started a conversation, just like here. Where do you come from? Why have you come here? And Prabhupada was explaining to this man that I've come to introduce Krishna consciousness on the order of my guru. There are books, there are temples, there are devotees, but only time is separating us. So this is one of the early memories, not that Prabhupada told, but just by chance this person was able to meet Prabhupada and later explain it to the devotees many years later. At first he lived in a tiny rented room, later in a Bowery loft, and finally in a Second Avenue storefront on the Lower East Side, where he drew an affectionate following from the local youth. So this is an example here, this picture of what New York City streets were like terribly you can say demoralizing, because so many people were congested within New York. Prabhupada once explained to the devotees in New York that there's a class of people that they have a particular karma that their whole life they never leave New York City. And that's what they call it the Big Apple, because the worms go in and out of the apple and that's all they know. So this is New York, so congested. At that time, 12 million people in one island, you know, different boroughs. Boroughs means different parts of, but so congested with people. Cars and practically no greenery anywhere. You can see there just like a cement jungle. People living on top of each other in skyscrapers, the Prabhupada would call them. So this is the New York where Prabhupada began his lecturing. He would sit on the floor with all of the devotees who were listening to him when he gave lectures. This is in the loft in the Bowery, where he was living with a drug addict. Paul Murray, he invited him when all of Prabhupada's things, his typewriter and his tape recorder, were stolen from his room on 72nd Street. He said, well, you come, I have a place at the Bowery, you can come live with me. Prabhupada didn't know what the Bowery was. Bowery was where all of the drunkards lived. And Prabhupada would have to step over the drunkards to get into his house, and then go up 4 flights of stairs to this room. And this is where Prabhupada started his lectures, down on the lower side of Manhattan.
It used to be warehouses, which have been converted into lofts.
Yes.
Big old rooms bigger than this, right?
Yes.
But with no amenities. There was
Nothing.
bare naked.
Right. Actually, there were workshops, sweat houses, where people would work just all day and night. And then as industrialization started, then all these places became empty and they rented them out to the artists. They're called air lofts, AIR, artists in residence. Very cheap, and because another aspect of the counterculture was communal living. So a lot of people could all live together in these big rooms. This is Prabhupada at 26 2nd Avenue. Still, he never compromised, always wore his robes. When he lived in Pennsylvania, he would wash his own clothes, and then on the neighbors' hedges, he would lay out his dhoti on the lawn. You know? This is Prabhupada alone in New York City. You see the desolate nature of the city life. This is just outside of 26 2nd Avenue. It's next to a petrol pump. They're called gas stations in America. This is the building that Prabhupada was looking at in all the poorer people and the hippies, they lived in the Lower East Side. So when Prabhupada lived on 72nd Street, that's where the richer people lived. This is the building Prabhupada wanted to purchase, with the restaurant on the bottom, a temple, and then a place for the devotees to stay. And this is where Prabhupada began the kirtan in public at Tompkins Square. These are some of the articles. New Indian religion sends you higher than LSD. So LSD, for those of you who don't know, there was a psychiatrist, Timothy Leary, and he experimented with psychoactive drugs that would open up your consciousness. So a lot of experimentation was being done by the youth at that time with LSD and different types of magic mushrooms and different types of chemicals to expand their consciousness, hoping that they would get some spiritual experiences by taking these drugs. So Prabhupada explained that my followers, they have taken LSD and things like that. I have never taken any of this. I've never even taken tea or coffee. But Prabhupada was considered by others to be conservative, but all Prabhupada was trying to do was bring these followers to a human level so they would stop their drug taking and the different types of intoxication, following the four regulative principles. It wasn't that Prabhupada was conservative in any way. He was just trying to help his followers become human beings. Finally, in the Second Avenue storefront on the Lower East Side, where he drew an affectionate following from the local youth. Srila Prabhupada did not regard his personal history as an important subject for study. His interest was to publish many volumes about Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But according to the spiritual science, a pure devotee of God is as important as God himself, because he delivers the message of Godhead to a forgetful humanity. Srila Prabhupada's life, therefore, is an important and absorbing subject, and it is a tangible proof of the existence of spiritual reality and love of God. So this volume 2, Planting the Seed, particularly Satsrup Maharaj is discussing planting the seed in America and how Prabhupada then took it from New York to San Francisco to Montreal. From Montreal, then he sent his devotees to Europe, to Germany, and to London, and to France. But this planting the seed actually was going on by Srila Prabhupada all over the world. And this particular book affected so many people that just by reading this book, they became devotees. One example is that one of our previous Gurukula principals, it was the first book that she read, and she became a devotee just by reading about Prabhupada's struggles. Another example is everyone who reads this book, they, according to what their proclivities are, they will apply those struggles and how Prabhupada sacrificed so much to bring Krishna consciousness to the Western countries. So, for instance, Jamuna, when she first received this book, she saw it as, because Prabhupada had specifically trained her in cooking, she was very interested in what Prabhupada cooked when he was on the Jaladuta. Because Prabhupada, we'll find out, maybe not today, but in the coming weeks, we will hear from Prabhupada's diary everything that he ate. Bati chachari, khichdi, curry, chira, all those things. So Jamuna took this book and this part of Prabhupada's life, this journey, which is the first chapter, and she made a whole separate presentation of how Prabhupada cooked all of these things for our benefit, because she had personally learned from Prabhupada how to make bati chachari, how to make all of these things that were completely unknown to the Western world. And then you have Vishnu Jan Swami, who was one of the greatest Sankirtan leaders in the entire universe. Just by hearing him chant, people became devotees. So he applied this volume, Planting the Seed, to how we each have to plant a seed in the heart of the living entity. And he said that if you plant a seed and you water it, within that seed is a 500-foot tall tree. And someone may argue that, no, the tree's not in the seed, but the tree is in the seed. And it's just a matter of watering and nourishing, and that tree will become 500 feet. So he said through this Sankirtan, by planting the seed of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, and by chanting Hare Krishna, everyone can become Krishna conscious. So because he was a Sankirtan leader, that's how this book inspired him. Then the way Prabhupada planted the seed in other parts of the world, same expression, planting the seed. Prabhupada went to Hong Kong, first time. They put Prabhupada in the Hilton Hotel so that he could have programs there. And one Chinese boy came to hear the lecture. His name was Cheng Li, something like that. So he asked Prabhupada a question that in our Chinese culture, we're very family-oriented. So if we're very attached to the family, then how can we become Krishna conscious? And Prabhupada, just like a thunderbolt, he answered, he is diseased, meaning to have family attachment, it's another form of disease. So this struck this person very deeply. And he became the one and only Chinese disciple of Srila Prabhupada. His name was Jasumati Sutta. And he translated Prabhupada's books into Chinese. And a few years later, he brought the Chinese Bhagavad-Gita to Prabhupada and was reading it to Prabhupada in Chinese. And Prabhupada appreciated it so much, he said, oh, this is so sweet. So there again, Prabhupada planted the seed in just one Chinese young man, and by his translations, 25% of the entire global population then had the opportunity to access Krishna consciousness. And then the other example, in Russia, Prabhupada was only able to go once. He was only able to meet one interested Russian young man. And he initiated him. His name was Ivan. Yes, Anatoly, right. And he became Ananta Shanti. His samadhi is here at the Goshala. And through him, the entire country of the Soviet Union was able to access Krishna consciousness. So we're going to read about planting the seed in America, but this planting the seed was going on all over the world by Srila Prabhupada, and that was why he was constantly traveling. The devotees couldn't understand when he set up 26 Second Avenue, and the devotees invited Prabhupada to go to San Francisco. They thought this was it. This was ISKCON, 26 Second Avenue. They never dreamed that Prabhupada would ever leave them and go anywhere else. But Prabhupada, he had plans for the whole world. And this is what the devotees had to learn how to serve Prabhupada in separation from that time onwards. Okay, so now we're actually going to start the book today with chapter 1, and it's called The Journey to America. And strangely enough, because we were reading earlier that Srila Prabhupada on August 13th, Friday the 13th, 1965, Prabhupada boarded the MV Jaladuta. Let's see if we have more pictures. This is a book, of course, Satsuru Maharaj in his acknowledgments, he said that most of his information, of course, came from his own memories and the memories of Brahmananda, who was the first temple president of ISKCON, and Hayagriva, who was one of the first of young men who met Prabhupada. So this was Hayagriva's book, The Hare Krishna Explosion. Very interesting book. We have it in the library. You're all welcome to read it. This is Hayagriva's perspective of this time at 26 Second Avenue and onwards. Yes, so now we have Srila Prabhupada with the Jaladuta. This is Prabhupada's diary. So what Satsuru Maharaj does is he doesn't start with August 13th, when Prabhupada started writing about his trip. He starts with September 10th, nearly 1 month later. Jaladuta Diary, September 10th, 1965. Today the ship is plying very smoothly. I feel today better, but I am feeling separation from Sri Vrindavan Dham and my Lord Sri Govinda, Gopinath, Radha Damodar. My only solace is Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, in which I am tasting the nectarine of Lord Chaitanya's Leela. I have left Bharat Bhumi just to execute the order of Sri Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati in pursuance of Lord Chaitanya's order. I have no qualification, but have taken up the risk just to carry out the order of His divine grace. I depend fully on their mercy, so far away from Vrindavan. So that was September 10th, after Prabhupada had suffered 2 heart attacks. He was recovered now in the Atlantic Ocean, feeling better. Let's see if we can find it, just to show you. Jamuna writes, because before this book was printed, they had photocopies that were being distributed. She said it was so hard to read Prabhupada's handwriting. You see here, so on the side, the editors, they deciphered what Prabhupada had written. So this is that September 10th entry. The Jaladuta is a regular cargo carrier of the Scindia Steam Navigation Company, but there is a passenger cabin aboard. During the voyage from Calcutta to New York in August and September of 1965, the cabin was occupied by Sri Abhay Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami, whose age was listed as 69, and who was taken on board bearing a complimentary ticket with food. The Jaladuta, under the command of Captain Arun Pandya, whose wife was also aboard, left at 9:00 a.m. on Friday, August 13th. So, I'm sorry, Satsvarup Maharaj, he explains this. He said that these memories of the times when he met Prabhupada in New York and thereon afterwards, again and again devotees will ask him, can you tell us some stories about Prabhupada? Can you tell us your memories about those early days? And Satsvarup Maharaj, he would tell the stories so many times that he felt that they were canned. Canned means, instant food, same stories over and over again. And he was wondering that, don't people get tired of hearing the same stories over and over again? But then one time, a radio disc jockey, DJ, invited Satsvarup Maharaj to speak. He said, I've been reading your book, Planting the Seed. And when I read these stories, he was Indian, his name was Ashok. He said, when I read these stories, I get romanchit. That means my hair starts standing on end. So I want you to come to my radio show and tell these stories. And this is exactly what Satsvarup Maharaj loved to do. He loved to tell the stories. He said he didn't care if devotees say to him, well, we've heard this story so many times now, Maharaj. He didn't care, because every time he told the story, it was as if he was there again with Srila Prabhupada. And he didn't think, he used to say, well, I just told the same story last week, you can just read it, No, he started to realize that when I tell these stories, if someone can get romanchita, that means the hair standing on end, then it's worth to tell the same stories over and over again. And he gave the example of, in America, just like we here in India, we had, there was a revolution against the British, and then they gained independence. So in America, there was something called the Civil War, where the North and the South were fighting. And when Civil War veterans would tell their stories, everyone would be so interested to hear. So he said, actually, we who were with Prabhupada in the early days, we're like veterans, because no one else is able to tell the stories of being with Prabhupada as we are, because we were there with Prabhupada. So he never tires from telling the stories over and over again. So actually, we have the whole rest of our lives to hear these wonderful pastimes about Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada, he kept this diary. Now, why does a person keep a diary? He doesn't keep a diary just for himself to read. Prabhupada wrote to Achyutananda Swami here in India that whatever the Acharya and the saintly devotees handwrite, that handwriting should be preserved. So Prabhupada, he actually wrote this diary for us. And as we read through, because Satsuru Maharaj couldn't put the whole diary in the book, but we have the opportunity to read every day, and we'll learn so much about Prabhupada, about how he was able to conquer all of these obstacles he had from the day one, and we'll be with Prabhupada, just hearing these stories. So I want to read from Friday the 13th. Today at 9 a.m. embarked on MV Jaladuta. So who knows what MV means? No one knows.
Merchant vessel?
Yes, it means motor vessel. Yes, because there's steamships, and you'll see in the pictures, you see there's a big chimney there. Now, in the bottom of the boat, under where the water is, there's huge engines, and there are men down there, and they're feeding coal into the engines, and the steam is coming up, and it's making propellers go at the back of the ship, and that's what's pushing the ship on. So these are called motor vessels for that reason. So MV Jaladuta. I have another picture here. Yes. There were 3 Jaladutas. The first Jaladuta was scrapped long, long before Prabhupada took his voyage. The second Jaladuta, that's usually the picture that we see. But that Jaladuta was scrapped in 1963. So this is the boat that Srila Prabhupada went on. It's a very modern looking boat. But because it had a swastika on the front, and swastikas were not popular in the Western countries, they used the second picture.
So swastikas is an ancient faith.
Yes, but the Westerners don't know that. So, right. Okay, so now we'll go on. Came with me, then Prabhupada lists the people who came with him to the port. Bhagavati, his sister. The Dwarwan of Scindia Sunsir, that was the kirtan leader who was helping Prabhupada. Mr. Sen Gupta, Mr. Ali, and Vrindavan, Prabhupada's son. The cabinet is quite comfortable. It is owner's residence, and therefore the sitting room, the bedroom, and the bath and privy, all equipped with first-class materials. Everything is nice in the first-class compartment. And thanks to Lord Sri Krishna for his enlightening Srimati Sumati Murarji for all these arrangements. I am quite comfortable. Now, another amazing thing is, we saw the Hare Krishna Explosion book by Hayagriva. So Hayagriva and Kirtanananda, when they were Keith Ham and Howard Wheeler, they took a boat trip to India to find a guru. They went on this same boat. And when the boat came back from New York, then Prabhupada boarded that boat. Yes, that'll be described later. The ship started at 1:30 p.m. very slowly from the dock. You see, Prabhupada's writing as if he's writing a book, and we're all there with him. And reached near Botanical Garden and stopped. So we have some maps here. Yes, here. Okay. The Botanical Garden, there's Calcutta up there, and then it comes down to the Diamond Harbor. So the Botanical Gardens are on the banks, along the bank of the Ganga. So Prabhupada passed by that botanical garden and stopped at midstream of the Ganges till 11 p.m. and then turned towards the front and started. It is quite steady. I cannot understand in my cabin if it is at all moving. That's because Prabhupada was still on the Ganga. He hadn't reached the Bay of Bengal yet. I am so comfortable. The voyage was again stopped at 3:30 a.m. at Kalpi. So here's Kalpi, this place. So Prabhupada went all the way from Calcutta down to Kalpi. How do I get rid of this? Oh, there. Okay. Whoops. Prabhuji? How to expand this? Thank you. Near Diamond Harbor, there's Diamond Harbor, and Gonokali, and detained for about 8 hours. The delta of the Ganges is quite wide with shallow water. So I think we have here. Now we can see in this map, you can see the Ganga up there and the Jalangi, which is creating Navadvip, and how the Jalangi and the Hooghly joined together again. And then at this point in Calcutta, how Prabhupada traveled down into the Ganga Delta. So now we'll go on to the 14th. The ship started at about 11 o'clock in the morning majestically. I do not feel any jerking whatsoever. But on reaching the Bay of Bengal, there is tilting of the ship and little rolling also. The roughness increased gradually on the upper Bay of Bengal. That's here, once he got out into the bay. And I felt seasickness. There was vomiting tendency and dizziness, and I felt uncomfortable the whole day and night. The sea was foaming all through. It appeared like a big plate of water extending to 40 square miles. So I have that picture there. You see, there's the boat, and all you see, once you're out to sea, you only see water, and it looks like it's only 40 square miles. But factually, it was endless, so to say. It is a vivid example of God's Maya, because it appears like something, but factually, it is something else. So when you're in a boat in the middle of the sea, it looks like the sea is just like a circle, like a plate, but actually the sea is endless, just like Maya. Then on the 15th, in the morning I woke up and felt a little better, but I felt no hunger. Took only a glass of lemon sikanji, nimbu pani, but the head dizziness is continuing. Up to 10:30, I was in the cabin's room, radio room, chatting with the officers. In the radio room, they were dispatching news to other ships. The captain's room is full with nautical paraphernalia. I saw a chart of different appearances, photo of the sea. Now I have that chart. Here it is. You see down here, that's a man, his head, his arms, and his legs. So the nautical chart, it describes the sizes of the waves when you're out at sea. So they were describing to Prabhupada that now we're at number 4, and it goes up to twice the height of the man, 3 times the height of the man. That's how big the waves become. I think there, like that. They overtake completely. And this is what Prabhupada later would be experiencing while he was traveling.
It was Prabhupada's first experience of being on a ship.
First experience, yes. And the seasickness comes about because inside of our ears, we have these balancing equipments in the inner ear. And when there's movement, the balance goes off, and the brain, because our feet are not steady, and our eyes are not steady when the boat is moving, so the brain is getting signals from different parts of the body that it can't put together. So therefore, the brain doesn't function properly, can't eat, can't function properly, and this is what Prabhupada was going to have to learn how to overcome. And aside from that, Prabhupada had no cooked food. He had only brought chira with him at this time. But the head dizziness is continuing. Yes. The grades are 0 to 12. There it is. You see? And I think we are passing on the sea between 4 to 7 points. That means the waves were over the head of a man. The scene of the 10th point was furious, and the 12th serious. The captain advised me to take more solid food. Monday the 16th. Today early in the morning I saw that the ship is plying on the surface of the sea, almost on 0 degree of waves. Yesterday night was comfortable, and although I did not take my lunch, I took a little charamurki with milk, that's chira. The ship ran all the night yesterday smoothly, and the sky, although not very clear, there was moonlight in the night. In the morning there was sunshine, but after 11 the sea became a little more rough, showing foamy waves from distance. After passing the latitude of Trichinopoli, that's in Tamil Nadu, we experienced a dark cloud subsequently raining all over the sea. The siren sounded on account of hazy vision to warn other ships coming from opposite direction. At about 12 noon it is raining heavily, and the ship has stopped moving, occasionally sounding the siren. There is constant sounds of thunderbolt. This is the first time I'm experiencing heavy rains in the midst of deep ocean. From 12 noon we are passing through cyclonic weather. The ship is tilting too much. I felt seasickness all day and night. At 3 p.m. the ship turned towards Ceylon coast, and we are now in the Ceylon water. So Ceylon means Lanka. This is the ship coming down towards Lanka. Okay, we'll go back to a little bit of the reading here. Srila Prabhupada noted the cabin is quite comfortable, but on the 14th, that's the day we just read, 14th, 15th, and 16th, he reported seasickness, dizziness, vomiting, Bay of Bengal, heavy rains, more sickness. Now, Satsrup Maharaj skips to the 19th, so we'll read the 17th and 18th. Today morning the sky is scattered with cloud. The ship is going toward western side, so you see now, because it has to go over to the west, around to the other side of Lanka to get to Colombo. I feel a little bit well after passing my stool. The ship is running against wind current. The sea is a little rougher. At 10:30 we saw the south coast of Ceylon with a white lighthouse. So that's right down here. 2 ships passed from the opposite side. Some daring fishermen were fishing in small boats. From distance they appeared to be almost drowning in the water, but next moment they appear to be safely working. There is sunshine, but the sky is not clear. The captain informed me that by next 6 hours we shall reach Colombo port. The hilly southernmost Ceylon coast is said to be 4 to 5 miles away from our ship. This means the fishermen were fishing in small boats 5 to 10 miles away from their native coast. Certainly very daring job. At about 2 p.m., we have now turned towards the northern front. So now Prabhupada is going up. The sky is cloudy, but we are forwarding steadily. Today I'm better than the other 3 days. At 3 p.m., the Colombo city became faintly visible from the ship. The color of water in the Indian Ocean is different from that of the Bay of Bengal. So you can see, all they had was videos of this. When the two waters meet, and there's also a place at the bottom of India where the three waters meet, the Arabian Sea, the Indian Ocean, and the Bay of Bengal. But at Sri Lanka, the Bay of Bengal meets with the Indian Ocean. And because the densities and the salinity, that means the salt in the water, and the temperature are different, the two waters don't mix. And they're two different colors because one is saltier than the other. So Prabhupada was able to see that dividing line between Bay of Bengal and the Indian Ocean. The ship reached exactly at 4:30 in the port. We have that picture. There's the port of Colombo. But the management of Colombo port could not receive the ship for want of berth, and that it is anchored on the shore waiting to enter the port. At about 9 p.m., the ship was escorted by the pilot, and we entered the dockyard, very old pattern. But there were many ships from various countries, including passenger and cargo ships. That's the nighttime view of the port. At night, the dockyard ships assumed a brilliant spectacle on account of profuse light. We rested the whole night, the ship being anchored. Next morning, barges loaded with goods arrived near the ship. Now the 18th. Today, 18/8/65, I felt quite normal, and the seasickness completely removed. So you have to remember that later in the trip, Prabhupada, he got to speak on the telephone to Sumati Murarji when they went over to Cochin. And Prabhupada told her that he was suffering from seasickness. And Sumati Murarji was always encouraging Prabhupada. She said, "No one ever died of seasickness. You will adjust." The ship remained silent the whole day. Okay, I wanted to see the Colombo city, but I could not make any arrangement. The ship was standing at midstream, and I did not like to go alone. So finally, Prabhupada did go. This is Colombo in those days. Thursday the 19th. The next morning, I informed my situation to Captain Pandya, and he was very kind to take me to the shore in a motor launch. We dropped at Elizabeth Gate, talked with some Ceylonese clerks, and then in a taxi we went to the office of Narottam and Pierre Company. The manager, Mr. Bunka, was a Gujarati gentleman, and he received us well. He arranged for me a good car to go round the city. The office quarter was quite busy, and many foreign offices and renowned banks were there. I saw the Governor General's house, the Parliament House, the Town Hall, and one very nice seaside hotel, and passed through very nice clean roads and bazaars. The city appeared to be nice and clean, and the small bungalows nicely decorated. It appears that people, although not very good-looking, they are not uncultured, neither they are tasteless. The city is quite up to resembling an Indian city like Madras and Pune. The buses and taxis were clean to see. The bus stands almost crowdy like that of Indian cities. The offices conducted almost in Indian style. The culture and civilization is Indian 10%, but artificially India and Ceylon is divided. We started for Cochin, At 6 p.m., the ship started at 7 p.m., the pilot being late in reaching the ship. It ran for the whole night and next day up to 3:30 p.m. and reached the coast of Cochin. The ship is standing on the coast of Cochin without entering the dock. So later, Prabhupada sent his disciples to Lanka to open a temple. Hansadutta, yes, Hansadutta went there. And before that, before Hansadutta went there, Dhananjaya, was Scottish, and he had gotten the Bhaktivedanta Manor in England, and then he had gone to Amsterdam and opened a temple, and he was thinking that no devotees have gone yet to Lanka. So he was sent to meet Prabhupada in Mayapur, and sitting in Prabhupada's room, he was just about to ask Prabhupada if he could open a temple in Sri Lanka. And Prabhupada started speaking about Lanka, and he was saying that anyone who goes to Lanka, they become a Ravana. So he was thinking to himself, well, this is not a good time for me to ask him. And then Prabhupada looked at him, and he said, I want you to become the temple president of our Vrindavan temple. So Dhananjaya had his idea of what he wanted to do, but Prabhupada had a whole other idea of what he wanted Dhananjaya to do, and Dhananjaya became our first temple president that way. Later, Hansadutta went, and he was able to defeat some scientists. There were very lively conversations between Hansadutta and the scientists, and yes, the scientist was defeated. All right, time is past. We'll see you all next week. Hare Krishna. Right. We're only on 4 days now.
Amazing details are beautiful.
Yes. That's Prabhupada. He gives so many details for us, as if we're right there with him.
It is quite an adventure, right?
Yes. Okay. Did we miss anything?
Yeah, I wonder, the British made Sri Lanka a separate country. It was mostly Buddhist then.
Well, even Vedically, it was quite separate.